Welcome to Buckets. I am your host, Brandon Anderson, here with guest Matt Moore here at the Action Network on our Buckets podcast. We are going to be launching this fall and throughout the season a Friday episode. Matt has given me the Friday green light. I get my own Friday episode. Heaven help us all. We'll be talking futures. We'll be playing games every now and then. Today, a very special kickoff episode for you. We are doing our Elite 100 NBA basketball player ranking because who doesn't like arguing about player rankings? Don't forget, before we get to all that, make sure to download and get the Action Network app. If you have not done so yet, make sure to follow myself at Wheaton Brando, Matt at HP Basketball. Yes, is that you on the app? Are you HP Basketball?
Yep.
He is that me. Indeed. Follow us there, get all of our picks, all of our futures. Follow the whole crew. I saw Joe Delara this morning as we tape drop like 7,000 different season-long player props in there. This is the time of year, get those notifications on. Make sure to follow us on our YouTube page as well, youtube.com/The Action Network. Lots and lots of Buckets season coverage coming for you these next few weeks. It's October. That means the season is just around the corner. Matt Moore, how does it feel to be a guest on your own podcast here at Buckets?
It's very weird. It's very odd. It's not like when someone else is driving and like they're like a fine driver and you're just like still like, but you should do it. The hands of the car. Like that's how I feel right now. But school, I'm excited to be on. You're going to do a great job. The best thing one of the reasons we decided to do this was Brandon's got, I don't remember the number. He has a ton of followers in the Action Network app. And so like everyone's plugged in on trying to get his bets first and foremost. And you can get that, by the way, by turning on pro subscriptions in the app. So I wanted to give Brandon, we've been doing these podcasts forever, he and I, and because we both have a lot of thoughts, they go long, but there's also like, you can get lost in there. So I thought it'd be like a really good opportunity for him to be able to like one, talk to other guests and get their thoughts and kind of explore the things that he wants to talk about. But also like, you're going to get unfettered access to his picks. So like on Friday, when you want to know what the NBA futures analyst is betting, you're going to be able to get that when he's got those plays for you. It's going to be, I think, a great episode. We're excited to have him.
Thank you. I appreciate the plug. For today, a few less bets, a few more opinions today. We're doing the Elite 100. This has been your project. You did this a year ago, ranking the top 100 players. I begged myself on this year. So this year we have a two-man Elite 100. We will have our composite rankings going up. So Matt, this is your project. Just paint the picture here. What's the concept? How'd you get here? What are we doing today?
Yeah, so I started this up back at CBSSports.com when I worked there in the mid 2010s, and it wasn't like an original idea, obviously. Like everyone's done the top 100 forever. I did decide to kind of brand it the Elite 100, and the idea for me is if you're trying to separate out the players that matter, the players that really matter in the league, and there's a lot of ways to kind of distill that. For me, it's always going to be about the impact on winning, because that's how I judge MVP, is like who's the player that impacts winning the most in a given season. And the hard part about that is you have to fight some of your own biases, because you and I are in alignment, actually, as much as we're going to fight today. We're in alignment on a lot of like the core concepts of what matters and what doesn't. The difference is that I am definitely shaped by my coverage of the league and talking to players, coaches, and executives in getting a sense for, like, they will very strongly tell you how much scoring matters in the NBA. And like my impulse is always to be like, anybody can kind of get you 22. You give them enough minutes and usage and anybody can get you 22. And the difference is how they get those 22 and the way that they get them. And for the players and coaches, it's much different than the way that we think of it, which is like, how many shots did you need to get 22? They think of it very differently. And those creator elements, what your role is, how hard that role is, all of these things play a part in it. I'm a very multimodal type of writer and analyst where I'm trying to incorporate as much information as possible. So I like the challenge of trying to get into an idea of, if we consider as many factors as possible, who are the most elite 100 players in the NBA? And that's where this project comes from.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's hard to wrap your brain around. It's fun. I think to me, as far as like ranking criteria, things that are not considered here, at least for me, no contracts here, nothing about the money. This is about what player, for me, it was a very simple question. What player do I want right now for 1 year to try to win an NBA championship? That's what my rankings became for me. Now, that does mean I have to project what I expect happens for this year. That means I have to project a little bit of aging for the older guys. I have to project development for the younger guys, but not so much. Just right now, 1 year. Like, this can't be the guys that I really like. You know how I am with the draft guys. Oh, I love this guy. Maybe a few years from now, he'll be really good. Well, that's great. That's not what this project is for. This is who's going to help me win right now. And yeah, on my personal rankings, which we're not going to get into those too much on the show, exactly how they went, but I have different tiers. And I literally have a tier I just call the vomit tier of the guys that I think fit the thing you were just talking about of like the bucket getters, right? The scorers, the ISO guys. That's not my brand. That's not my style. So you're right. You've had those conversations. I don't have access to those conversations. I think I come from this a little bit more theoretical on team and defense and that sort of thing. Are there any other criteria that you specifically are considering or are definitely trying to leave out as you think about these guys?
So I mentioned role, and I think it's like really important where there are creators, and like here's a good example is LaMelo Ball went way up in my rankings last year, and I had him like 86 last year and got a bunch of pushback, and then he had a terrible start to the season, and I was like, ha ha, and then he got hurt again, and I wasn't able to victory lap it. Hope he's healthy this year, because like one of the things that I do think that like I did need to kind of compensate for is the value of being an engine. Like if you're a team's engine and you've got the ball in your hands and you're primarily responsible for not only bringing the ball up the court, initiating the offense, dealing with on-ball pressure, making sure that the set's organized in whatever way, even if it's a read, you still have starting positions from where you're going to make those reads from. That role takes a lot more. And it's not that point guard's necessarily that person, because sometimes that offense runs through the shooting guard, the center, the small forward. It's entirely dependent on, are you the engine of that team? And so that to me matters quite a bit. You mentioned kind of the young guys. One of the things that's really difficult is I think there's like a projection and then there's an expectation. And those should be the same thing, but for me, it's a little bit different in that. And it's one of the reasons why you and I were kind of talking, and you said, I think I'm going to have more of the old guys and you're going to have more of the young guys. And I think that's true on aggregate, but it's less so about some of the stars that are young. There's a few stars I'm much higher on than you, but in general, it's more like, okay, because I'm very hard on young guys, because my thing is you got to do the thing. Like it's cool that like everyone think like he's shown flashes. Neato, I need you to do the thing. And I'm always going to lean towards veterans over guys that are capable of doing the thing. But also trying to factor in what you kind of expect from them. And those projections, that line is very difficult to walk, but it is something that I do try and consider. I will not lie here and say that there is a chemistry and how it is to play with you component that does matter to me. And it's not necessarily like the Bill Simmons, would you want to play with this guy in pickup? But it's more akin to, do I get the sense that other guys love playing with you? Do I get the sense that other players are thrilled to be on your team? And that gets into like, do you make other guys better? There's a balance there between you do the production and do you make other guys better? And sometimes if a guy's really good at making other people better, that will win out. And sometimes if a guy's really good at getting buckets, that guy's going to win out. And that balancing act is my favorite part of this exercise. It's trying to be fair against my biases and trying to evaluate what really is most valuable in the league.
Yeah, I think for me, the part that I like best is similar to that. But for me, this is a team building exercise also. This for me is, okay, if I'm going to start from scratch here and try to build a team and try to think of these guys outside of the only context we actually get them in, like I'm not evaluating this player on their current team. I am. That's the only data we have. But I'm trying to evaluate a player on any team, 30 teams, whoever they might be. So there are different players where that makes you more valuable, especially wings, where they're harder to come by. So I'm kind of bumping you in value. There are players where that makes you a little less valuable. I think to me, that's where the engines thing you talked about comes more into play too, where I'm like, okay, you're the engine, but what car are we driving? Like, if you're the engine of the car, do I want the car? Because if not, then I'm not sure I want the engine either. And that's where I get to some of the guys that I end up a lot lower on than I think than you and then consensus too. So last question before we get into this. I'm just curious for you, what is the point of this whole thing? Like, other than getting yelled at on the internet, which you and I both love to do, you are supremely good at getting yelled at on the internet. what is the point of ranking 100 guys, especially on a betting podcast here at Action Network? What are we getting out of this for us, for you? What's the point?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of value for kind of establishing who are the guys that make a difference in this league, and a way to kind of consider where you're at as you evaluate these teams of talent, because so much of my analysis is team based. Like, I just prefer to look at these teams as a whole, because I don't, if you're having a great individual season and your team isn't any good, it's not that I hold you responsible entirely for it, but I'm going to hold you a little responsible for it, like you kind of mentioned. So that's the car thing. And so trying to evaluate, like, okay, just how good is this player, and trying to get a sense for where the hierarchy is. I also think it's like a good reminder of, like, when you start looking at these and how many guys in your 100 does each team have, that helps you get a baseline for like exactly how talented that team is, because I can get suckered into matchup stuff, and it's important to remember, like, oh, this team has 3 guys in my top 20. They're probably going to be pretty good. They're still probably going to have an advantage over most teams. I'll be honest. I think in future years, I honestly would be very interested in doing something that is akin to trying to establish, like, I've got a projection based off of EPM, estimated wins, actually, for spread value. And I would be very interested in the future of trying to establish some sort of system for us to evaluate what the most powerful players are to the spread. But that's such, like, and because you can get into, hey, this guy's like teams always cover, or when this guy plays, their ATS differential is X versus Y when he's out. All those things I think are really interesting. But from this exercise, I think it's very much a holistic view of where is the league going into the season from a talent standpoint, because you want to get as many perspectives as possible when you're entering into the market, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, for me, a guy that focuses on looking at the whole forest, the chessboard, whatever the analogy you want to do, to me, this is not a throwaway exercise at all. This is absolutely vital to me to look at these guys, look at them in context. I ranked them by position starting out as best as we can guess position still for some of them. This, to me, it determines how's your contract value, how does your team building setup and salary cap value look. That matters because it's going to impact the trades coming and going. That matters for futures. It all plays together for me. So this stuff is absolutely key. So let's get into it. Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to reveal, look, we're going to have a written version of this that comes out next week. You get the preview here on Buckets today. We're going to tell you who our rankings are in a lot of these guys. So we have a composite rankings, just mine and Matt's averaged together. So we're going to reveal our top 10, and then we'll do some of Matt's guys, some of my guys on the way down, guys that we're a little higher on than each other, and then a few more exercises toward the end. So let's jump in at the top. Now, this is terrible podcasting to start at number 1. All of our editors would scream at us right now. Countdown to number 1. Matt, number 1 is Nikola Jokic. There's no countdown. There's no surprise. There's no reveal. It's Nikola Jokic. Number 2, we also agreed on as Luka Doncic. I don't want to spend too long on these guys. We know how good they are. Here's my question for you. How close for you was 1 versus 2? And what would Luka have to do to pass Jokic by the end of the season?
So I wrote a column after Luka won the Western Conference Finals that said that Luka would be considered the best in the world. I was very careful with how I worded this column. It aged like milk, but I still was very careful, specifically for this reason. And like was part of, like, I try and admit when I was wrong, and I didn't think Luka had what he did in him last year, which is funny because he actually wasn't good for 2 rounds, but then he was really great in the 3rd round. And so the idea was for that column that he would be, because of what he accomplished, he would be considered the best in the world. And what I didn't give people enough credit, because, like, as it was happening, everyone was still like, well, I mean, it's still Jokic. Like, analysts, fans, everybody's like, well, yeah, no, Luka's awesome. What an incredible season. I mean, still Jokic. And so, like, I honestly just didn't give him enough credit, especially coming off of Jokic kind of gassing out in Game 7 versus the Wolves. And for me, like, this was like the point where I had to just kind of like eat it and just be like, yeah, okay. So, like, I said that, but like, it's Jokic, and like everyone just kind of knows it's Jokic. I do think that the difference here is pretty razor thin, in that I don't think Jokic has been lucky in any regard, but I do think that Jokic has had a fortunate stretch of perspective of outcomes. That's the best way to put it. Like, the outcomes have worked out better maybe than the process in total. Like, last season, he won his 3rd MVP, and there was a lot of areas I could point to where I'd be like, he's a little worse in this than he used to be. at the rim shooting being a kind of key one. His floater was otherworldly, but his at rim stuff wasn't as good. 3-point shot fell off. All these types, the offense is honestly kind of stale at this point, and they need to reinvigorate it. And that's on coaching. It's also on Jokic, because he's just going through the motions like a lot of players do when they get to be this good at basketball. I think Luke is very close in that he is such. Jokic called him a one-man army, and that has rattled through my head over and over, and it really is true. Like, no one does more for their team than Luka. Other players, and particularly Jokic, do better for their team, but no one does more than Luka does. And if his team is able to give him more to where those outcomes are better, I think there's a real chance for us to look at the end of the season that Luka Doncic is the number one on the Elite 100.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I think for me, the no one does more argument is actually why I do think the gap is bigger than you have it. I think, to no one's surprise, I've always been the very high on Jokic guy. I didn't really have to even think about this here. He's a tier alone at the top for me. To me, it comes back to the team construct thing. Luka is a lot harder to build around, I think. And Luka is a lot harder to build the right team around. It took a bunch of years before they got the team that just went to the finals. And even then, we've seen in a lot of ways this team, a version of it for a long time already, because we already had the James Harden thing for a decade, and they're not the exact same player, but they're pretty similar. And we've seen a version of that team with a really, really high floor that gets great regular season numbers, that can make a run. But we never saw that team win a championship yet with that level of usage, with that much giving to the team. Jokic elevates everything around him. Luka does, but not anywhere near that level for me. That's the difference for them to me. I actually had to consider Luka. I consider Luka closer to 3 than I did to number 1. So let's go to the next 3 guys in our list here. They kind of all are together. Again, no huge surprises, but I want to talk about how did we order them. So our rankings came out: Jokic 1, Doncic 2, then 3, 4, 5. It goes 3 Giannis, 4 Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 5 Joel Embiid. So neither one of us ranked them in that order. This is our composite ranking. For you, how'd you split the difference between Giannis, Shai, and Embiid? How'd you order them, and why did you order them that way?
Okay, so for Giannis, I had Shai above him because Shai's season was absolutely just so stellar. So efficient, so impactful. He is an underrated defender. It's not that Shai's like a lockdown. He's not Tatum. And he's not Jaden McDaniels, for example, a player that should be in the Elite 100. But like, he is a very good defender, especially in his roles. Like, Shai, unlike Jokic, unlike Luka, is not a liability defensively. And he is a great passer. He's just not like an otherworldly one. He's not like top tier, but he's like a very good passer. And his finishing ability, drawing contact, scoring, 3-level scorer, all those types of things, his contributions to a team that was so good on both ends was really valuable to me. So for me, it's like Giannis, here's the big thing. Giannis's jumper hit a peak in 2021, and they won the title. And then every year it's just slid. And that going backwards really does hurt him. I don't need him to be a volume jump shooter. I need him, if he's going to take them, I need him to not waste possessions. Shai wastes almost 0 possessions. And he talked about that with Team Canada this summer, about learning to be even better at it. And I'm like, God, he's so controlled. Everything is at his pace. He's never sped up. Giannis can be sped up. Giannis can get out of control. And so for all those reasons, even though Giannis is so much of a better defender, Shai to me goes over Giannis. Embiid, honestly, you have him 4, I have him 6. And the reason I have him low is just injuries. It's just availability. If you told me that, like, hey, you're going to get 72 games out of Joel Embiid this season. Oh, okay, so I'm going to put Joel Embiid 4th. Like, no question, he'd be 4th. I'm still having those other guys above him because of the versatility and a number of other things, and they're more engines than he is. Joel's not an engine, but his still efficiency really matters, and he's a wonderful defender. He was awesome last year, but the availability has to matter here in my evaluations. So he goes 6th there. So that's how it goes.
Yeah, availability definitely a thing I factored in as well. Definitely, it's a projection, but we have some idea, and obviously with Embiid, it's a question, a big question. For me, I had Giannis 3rd, which is where he is in our rankings, but I have Luka, Giannis as a 2-3 tier, and then a bit of a drop off. And Embiid is my next guy. And to me, the reason Embiid is fourth for me is because if I knew Embiid was going to be healthy, he'd be in that tier with Luka and Giannis. But the injuries are what drag it down. Like, I need you in the playoffs. I need you for 2 months in the playoffs. My goal here is to win a title. We haven't seen you be able to do that yet. We haven't seen you do it for 1 month of that long, of staying healthy and giving the Embiid level. If I knew one game healthy, I think I could make a case that Embiid is number 2 on the list. I think that would be a case a lot of people would consider. That's what he has looked like the last couple of years. So that's kind of where I'm at on those. For me, Shea is the lowest of those three. I just need to see it a little bit more. We've seen it more from Giannis and from Embiid. We've seen more seasons of proof of it so far. I think, too, I'm a little bit, not concerned, but team construct-wise, Shea's non-shooting, I think, does restrict a little bit what the team has to look like to make him be as good as it can. We saw how much it was good last year when Chet was there. Most teams don't have Chet, so we'll get to him a little bit later. We're high on him, but I do think he is in a very good setting for him, and I think he also, to me, this is a bet on the rest of OKC. I like their roster a lot. I like their guys a lot. And I think that they're helping make him look good, who I still have 6th in my ranking. So it's not like I'm down on Shea, but that's the difference. So you mentioned a 6th, I mentioned a 6th. We've done 5 guys. Both of us have a top 5 player that is not in this 5 so far. Your guy at number 5 is not in our top 10. So we got to talk about him here. He's not in our 10 because of me, because I have at number 18. He is your number 5. Talk to me about Jalen Brunson.
Are you out of your fucking mind, Brandon? Like, look, dude. Okay, so I understand conceptually why you wouldn't love this guy. I think there has to be some consideration. I think part of it, honestly, is that you're always going to rank guys from a metrics perspective based off of their impact in various areas, and I get that. The fact that he finished 5th in MVP is not going to matter to you. It's going to matter to me because he was able to garner enough respect from everyone around the league to have finished with that kind of position. Moving beyond that, Joel Embiid has not made a conference finals, has not done it. Okay. Jalen, all right, has won playoff series as the guy. He has won tough playoff series where he was the dog as the guy. He is, if you may tell me to make a list of playoff motherfuckers, the baddest dudes to face, Jalen's probably my number 1 right now. Like, that's how tough he is in the playoffs in those environments. Tough play getter, efficient, smart, leads the offense, great in transition, great passer, able to navigate pick and roll at an extremely high level. I understand the ideas of, well, look, the Knicks offense isn't that great. Like, I'm the one that's always like, their half-court offense isn't good. I don't understand how this team is good. But a really good answer for how they're still good is Jalen Brunson. And to me, I cannot fathom having him that, like, if you want to be like, okay, I don't think that Jalen Brunson's a top 10 player. All right. But like 18, man? 18? For Jalen? No, Jalen's at that level. Jalen's that good. I can't fathom it. I feel very confident with Jalen at 5.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm buying Jalen at his absolute peak, and I think that he feels maxed out. The version that we've seen of him, I think that this is the best version, and already is not a top 5 player. So I don't know how he gets there. I'm concerned at age 28 for a small guard on a Tibbs team. It's more of a long-term thing, but I'm concerned about the durability, the health factors. That is a thing that could play in this year, especially after, running him to the ground last year, and a team that is really thin now. So he's going to have to do a lot, takes a high usage. I think at the end of the day too, my instinct is, and this plays a lot for me, especially higher in the rankings, I think Jalen Brunson is more additive than he is multiplicative. I think he adds offense to the team. I don't think he multiplies the offense and makes the other guys much better. That's a thing that Jokic clearly does. That's not fair to compare anybody to Jokic, but I think that's why the offense still isn't that good, because Brunson's offense is very valuable, but I have him ranked similar to guys like, here's some more slander for you, I have him in my rankings between Donovan Mitchell and Trae Young, who I think could pretty much do about the same thing in New York's offense, given that role that Jalen Brunson has. And that's the sort of way I'm trying to evaluate looking at this team. I have John Morant in that range. I think he could do similarly for this roster with that role, do everything, be all of our offense. Now, Brunson's better defender than those guys, and that's not nothing. But to me, that's why I have him a little bit lower.
Is Joel Embiid multiplicative or additive?
Joel Embiid is additive, but he's adding a lot more than Jalen Brunson. He's adding a huge amount more than Jalen Brunson by what he's doing.
But he's not the engine.
I think he's the engine. Who's
They're
the
not
engine?
giving him the ball on every possession. He's not initiating every set.
Can only a point guard effectively be the engine then, if that's the case?
No, but I think that you have to. It has to be a player with that type of role. Like Nikola Jokic is absolutely the engine. Nikola Jokic, he touches the ball in every possession.
He's effectively the point guard also.
Right, and so I mean, I think that's the kind of the difference here. Is it's less about point guard, and it's like the point guard is the engine. When we talk about like the center is the point guard, we're actually saying the center is the engine, and that's really kind of like the difference there. And that difference I think is meaningful. Now, I'm not arguing that Jalen should be above Joel because Joel's defense is so impactful. And Joel is such a lethal mid-range shooter. Like, he's unbelievable from mid-range now. But, like, I do think when you look at Jalen's offensive profile being 97th percentile in assist percentage, while 77th percentile in turnover percentage, being 83rd percentile from three, all of these kind of factors, I just wind up with the idea that I don't disagree with you that he's not the kind of creator that some of these other guys are.
Yeah.
But I do think that to me, being as much of a creator as he is, especially individually, like he honestly is more of a one-man offense for the Knicks than a lot of guys are for their teams. And that's not necessarily a good thing, but the level he does it at is pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say is I agree that he is a one-man offense. He is the engine. It's just he's the engine of what am I getting? And I don't think it is a championship team. But that's tough. That's a tough bar. There aren't that many guys. We might already passed the guys on the list. So speaking of non-engines, my guy that I have top 5 that is not in your top 10, you have him 14th. Responsible perspective. The man is very young. Let's not crown him just yet. Nah, we're crowning him. Number 5, Victor Wembanyama. He actually comes in 8th on our top 10 list, but I have him number 5. Look, you can listen to me just like blab on about all the Victor Wembanyama stuff on our the episode we did on the Spurs division. We talked a lot about him. I think last season, from like the opening month to then November, December, to then January forward, to even post All-Star break, we saw already like 4 years of NBA progression of how his career has moved forward. I was the Wemby skeptic coming into last year. From January forward, I genuinely think already, I'm not projecting, he already, since January started, has been a top 5 player in the NBA by the metrics that I trust, by the things I use, and specifically because I genuinely think, even though there's not a really good way to contextualize this data-wise, I think he is so much better and more impactful defensively than anyone else is even remotely in his universe that we don't really know how to value that properly. We've learned how to value offense. We just talked about it. We're going to keep talking about these guys. What's an engine of a defense? What does that mean? What can you add to a defense? What can you multiply in a defense? I think Victor Wembanyama is like a number 1 defense all upon himself already. I think his offense is still coming around. I'm not rating him here because I think he's an incredible offensive player. If I thought he was an incredible offensive player, he would be in the Jokic tier. Like, that's how high I am on what he's doing defensively. I think right now, Victor Wembanyama, going into the season already, is a top 5 player. I have him ahead of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in my rankings, who I'm picking to win MVP, by the way. Talk to me about Victor Wembanyama.
Okay, so last year, you were way late, right? You were very skeptical of the Wembanyama hype. We faded it together. I was with you on Scoot Henderson because I thought there was a good chance that Scoot would have a great season too. Wah wah. But you were late on that train. I was still like, he's still going to be amazing. Like, he's like everything that I've heard about this guy is going to be amazing. I was on time on Victor Wembanyama. This season, you're early. You're waiting for that train to arrive. Like you're there you're a dad 2 hours early, 2.5 hours early to the airport. Okay. Because you were late last time and you're never going to be late again on Victor Wembanyama. I'm right on time. The things that I will bring up about Victor are going to sound, I think, especially to someone like you, as nitpicking and that they're irrelevant, but they're really important over the course of 100 possessions for 82 games. Defensively, he's such a monster. He is so impactful because of these things that he's capable of. He also absolutely gets thrown around by bigger bodies, and not just the elites like Jokic and Embiid. He gets thrown around by guys with veteran, big man, old man muscle, and he has a hard time dealing with that, and it can expose some vulnerabilities on the interior. His impact is so great that you wonder what it is that it's doing. Like his presence, we're going to have a lot of conversations about Victor Wembanyama related to Steph Curry's gravity, because it's the same thing. And I will say, like, this has always been a sticking point with me. You don't get credit for something the other team decides. Like, they can challenge you, and if you succeed, you get credit for that. If they don't challenge you, it's part of the equation, but I'm not going to over-index on that. And I think there was a lot of that last year, and I think the guys will probably attack him a little bit more this year now that they've seen him, because there was a lot of, what the fuck is this? Like, one of my favorite things last year was just seeing guys' expressions at the bench after dealing with something Wemby did. They'll be less shocked by that because they played against him now. Now, he's added 25 pounds of muscle. That matters. His jumper should be cleaner. A lot of it is like, if you run pick and pop with Victor Wembanyama, you're not going to get a good screen. And his footwork on the jumper proceeding, say 4 to 6 times out of 10, is going to be a little sloppy. And it's going to reduce his likelihood of converting that shot. The jump shot itself is still a work in progress. I'm not denying how impactful he is. I have him as a top 20 player, as like a little bit, a baby, a toddler in the NBA. But we can't get ahead of ourselves in terms of what that knowledge base of what you learn provides, because coaches talk about this all the time of like, you got to know all of these little sequences, and he's still learning that. There's a knowledge base that comes with 3 to 4 years in the league, and Victor doesn't have that yet. He's going to get there. He's going to be one of the most impactful players in the league. Top 5 is too early. I want to be on time with Victor Wembanyama.
I really agree with pretty much all those things. I just think that he's going to be number one with a bullet once he gets those things that you are talking about.
Look, here's the thing, though. Like, you're early. If the train arrives ahead of schedule, you're on time.
Yeah, that's what I'm banking on here. Okay, so Jokic, Doncic, Giannis, Shea, Embiid. That's our top 5. Number 6, I think, is the biggest surprise in our top 10. We both had this guy top 8. He comes in number 6 composite. Number 6 is Tyrese Halliburton. I think to somebody looking at our list, this is the one we need to defend ourselves on. So I'm going to let you defend us. Why Tyrese Halliburton this high?
I said he was awesome 2 years, like before last season. I said he was awesome to begin the season. I said he was awesome when they made the finals of the play-in tournament. I said he was awesome at the end of the season, despite that shooting slump that everybody has over-indexed as some sort of huge knock against him because he was hurt. I said he was awesome in the playoffs. I said he was going to figure it out as the playoffs went along, and everyone was like, Tyrese Halliburton's not the guy. And then he was the guy, and he beat the Knicks, and everyone's like, Tyrese Halliburton is the second best offensive engine in the league. I know that doesn't sound right because he doesn't score 30 points a game. I get it. You put Tyrese Halliburton on any team, give him the ball, and tell them to run offense, and they're going to be elite. They're going to be elite. That's how good he is as a passer. And he is a good enough combination. He is evolutionary Steve Nash, where Nash always said after he wished he'd shot more, Halliburton's shooting more. And he's only going to get more confident in that. Halliburton should take a bump from watching Team USA, being around those guys. That typically helps you the next season with having seen how hard it is, like how hard those guys work. It sets the bar for you. He's going to learn from the playoff experience. I'm not worried about the injury. He was playing through injury last year because of the 66 game minimum. That's why he played through it. It was tough for me to bump him out of my top 5 for MVP and first team All NBA. That's how important Tyrese Halliburton is. He's the second best offensive engine in the NBA, period.
I agree with all of that. And I will say this on my list in tiers, he is not only this high on my list, he's in the tier with the guys above him, like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and Wembanyama and Embiid. He's in that tier. That's how good I think he is We've talked about engine. He is that engine. I agree with what you said. Number 7 on our list, maybe you've heard of him, LeBron James. Duh, we know how good LeBron is. Number 8, Wembanyama, we talked about. Number 9, Steph Curry. Again, not a lot to say there. Number 10 comes in a little bit lower, I think, than a lot of folks on the internet will be happy with. Number 10 is Jason Tatum. I have a note on here that I'm going to ask you, even though it's not fair, because I'm the reason that the answer is the question. So you have him 7th, I have him 13th. Why isn't Jason Tatum higher on our list? Why isn't he a top 5 player in the NBA for either one of us?
Because Tatum is not elite at anything besides wing defense, which is very hard to value, and it's not even his strongest skill. He's not the best wing defender in the NBA. He's not like, you probably wouldn't get there in the first 5 names you listed. If you're getting to 10, you probably need to rethink some things and pay more attention. He's not an elite jump shooter. He's not an elite 3-point shooter. He's not an elite finisher. He's not an elite passer. He's not an elite creator. He's not an elite engine. Jason Tatum is very, very, very good at all of those things. He is very good at all of those things. Hey, Jason Tatum is the primary ball handler and highest usage player for the number 1 offense in the NBA. I would say that when you see the rankings that come out, I want you to go ahead and find every member of the Boston Celtics and then ask yourself how many games they won and what their season ended up like last year. Because that's not going to make a lot of sense. Tatum is somewhere, I feel very confident, Tatum is somewhere between 6 and 10. And the lowest you can get to, I think, reasonably is 10. And the highest you can get to reasonably is 6. I don't think you can have him 5. He's just not a top 5 player. But you can't put him any lower than that because he is an elite defender for an elite defensive team and a top-level offensive player for the best offense. He took a step back last year, and he had some shooting like I'll say this, like I think his jumper struggled because he was in a different role. And I think there's entirely a bounce back where everybody's going to have to be after this year to be like, okay, fine, he's 6th, and that's how it's going to go. He has a consistent track record of improving year over year over year. He takes too many dumb shots. He needs to cut that out. But the other thing is those dumb shots look better if he converts them at a higher rate, which is why you take them. So at the end of it, he's not elite. That's why he's not elite at anyone's skill. You can identify it. And so that's why he's not higher. But having him 13th is still a very big insult.
Yeah, I think for me, I think we're really mostly on the same page. The reason that I have the floor, I guess, here a little bit lower for him is really just kind of probably a theory of how I'm ranking guys. To me, at the top, if I'm building a team, I'm just trying to get that dude that can be the best player on my championship team. And now look, Jason Tatum just was the best player on a championship team. We just watched it happen. You and I have said for years, can he be that? Doesn't really fit history. It happened. We have data that says it happened now. I still, for me personally, I'm going to look at a LeBron or a Steph Curry that I think still have a higher ceiling on a playoff run to lead you to a championship. For me, the reason why that extends down to 13 is maybe I'm flawed here. Maybe I'm past my prime picking these guys. Guys like Kawhi Leonard, if he could possibly be healthy, that's like Michael Jordan in the playoff level of basketball. Even if I only get it once every 5 tries, Jason Tatum is never going to be that for me. Anthony Davis, if he remembers to make jumpers for one of his playoff runs, can win a title for me without having 4 other dudes in the top 40 or 50 of the rankings. Jason Tatum has that. That's not a detraction from him. That's why he's not a top 5 guy. I agree he's in this range. I just ended up being like, well, I would rather shoot my shot at a guy that I think can go win me a championship without a ton of help. I just don't think Jason Tatum is going to be that guy. It's fine because he's got plenty of help and it doesn't really matter on the team he's on right now. One other guy you have in your top 10 that we haven't got to yet, you have him right at 10th. I'm a little surprised just because I don't feel like this guy feels like a top 10 player to me. Donovan Mitchell, why is he a top 10 player for you?
I'm surprised. We've talked about him every year for MVP on the MVP pod, man. Donovan is a 3-level scorer who's a great passer who you can give the ball to in key moments, and he'll generate the buckets you need in high leverage situations. We've seen him be the engine of a top flank offense in Utah, so we know that that's not like it's not like it would be absurd to be like, well, Rudy Gobert, like there are stats guys that would say this, but Rudy Gobert was really no. if you give him that kind of stuff, like if you, and we saw this honestly last season, if you just put two good and one elite shooter next to Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen, that's going to be a top 5 offense in the NBA. Just is. And there's a possibility that Kenny Atkinson is able to go ahead and coach this up to being a top 5 offense in the NBA this season. I wouldn't be surprised at it at all. Mitchell is that good. He is absolutely phenomenal in all those types of areas. The durability has been a little bit of a question mark in the last couple of years, but still he's mostly around for a lot of this. The fact that he was able to show what he did, like they lost Mobley and Garland and we're still winning games, and Mitchell was kicking ass. He is, I think, a top flight offensive player. He is not the kind of creator that Halliburton is, but I think you're absolutely right that if you put Donovan Mitchell on the Knicks, that I would feel actually probably better about it. Like Mitchell would be 5 and Brunson would be 10. They would switch places, but they're not. So I rank them based off of where they are in their spot. And so that's why I have Donovan Mitchell 10th.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I have him 17th. I actually thought that he was a little high for where I surprised myself with where he was in my ranking. I think just shooting guards and power forwards, and who knows with positions in the modern NBA, but to me, they're just a little bit less valuable from what you're contributing to the team. So I think that was part of it. A couple of teammates that we're going to get out of the top 10 here and just talk about some of the guys that we are in our top 40, but that we were pretty different on. You were really high on Sacramento Kings, and I am not. So De'Aaron Fox, I have De'Aaron Fox 40th. You have him 17th.
40th.
17th is how I feel. 40th might be surprising. In no world have I ever thought or could ever imagine thinking of De'Aaron Fox as a top 20 player. Domantas Sabonis, I thought I really penalized down to 36th. You have him 9 spots higher at 27th. DeMar DeRozan, I have at 67. You have at 39. You must think the Kings are like a top 2 team in the West if you're this high on these 3 guys. Tell me about the Kings in general, and especially why is De'Aaron Fox a top 20 player?
I think, by the way, I think there's a very strong possibility the Kings win like 44 games. There's also like a very good possibility, in my opinion, that they are a top 3 seed in the Western Conference, like they were 2 seasons ago, and have a lot of like sleeper buzz. Look, Fox is a phenomenal defender. He is one clutch player of the league for a reason. He's great in high leverage situations. Last season, the 3-point shot bottomed out over the back half because he got a little banged up and a little tired, but he was shooting 40%, and he had some absolutely massive scoring games to start the season. I actually think the more that Domantas kind of took over the role, the worse Fox got. There's this idea that Domantas is the best player on the Kings. That's absurd. That's absurd. And anyone that says this, get out of here. Sabonis can't play in a playoff series. Fox is playoff certified. Like, he was tough as nails in that playoff series versus the Warriors. So great 2-way player. He's developed his jumper into being a 3-level scorer. Great creator. Runs absolutely elite with his speed. Like you want an elite category, it's his speed and athleticism to get ahead of everybody else. Fox is, to me, do I think that Fox could be the best player on a championship team? No. And if you're like, if he's going to be top 20, he needs to be able to be the best player on a championship team. Okay. All right. Well, then get Anthony Davis the fuck out of that list. But De'Aaron Fox, to me, is extremely valuable from what he's able to bring to the table. And so all of that combined, given how he played last season, and again, I'll say, like, I'm going to use a train analogy. You were late on Kings 2 years ago, and you're still trying to get on time. The Kings are good. They had a rough season last year. The Kings are good. Sabonis is just basically like a production thing. I actually don't love Sabonis's impact stuff, but he puts up huge numbers. He led the league in triple doubles last year. He is a monster rebounder. He is a great passer. He is an efficient finisher. I do not want him on my team if I'm trying to win a playoff series. Do I think that's impossible for them to make a run? No, but I don't mind it. And DeRozan is just respect for the old head. Look, there's a lot of ways in which I think DeRozan makes other players worse around him, which means he should take a huge tumble. He's literally like the second best mid-range shooter in the game. His game is not efficient unless he's as efficient as he is at what he does. Like, his shot profile is awful, but he's so good at it, he makes it work. He is a good passer. He's become a better defender. Teammates love him. That's why he's top 40.
Yeah, I mean, that all makes sense. To me, DeMar and Sabonis is as much a team-building thing as anything else, where I really struggle to put either of those guys on an elite championship-level team. I don't think Fox being a top 20 player has to mean he can be the best player on a title team. There are not 20 dudes that can be the best player on a title team. There might not be 5. Like, I don't know where the list goes. It's certainly not 20. So it doesn't need to be that. 2 guys that I have higher than you, certainly also not the best player on a championship quality team. I have Trae Young at number 19, and then I have Karl-Anthony Towns 31st on my list. So 10 spots higher than you on Trae, 15 higher than you on Towns. To me, this is a bit of a projection forward on guys who I think should be ranked higher on other seasons, but aren't because of what we saw last year. But I'm projecting on the year forward. I'm projecting on a better team or a more neutral team situation. Towns at center changes everything about his value. It gives him the offensive value that the Timberwolves nuked by taking him away from center. I think that is going to be restored in New York because how he spaces out the offense, because of how the mismatches he's going to have. As a center, he is way, way more valuable to me. If he were a 4, he would be down in my 60s on this list for me. Trae Young, I think by what he does, as we think of Trae as a shooter, that's what we saw coming out of college with, he's the new Steph Curry. He's amazing. He is as a passer, and what he does for the offense, he's not Tyrese Halliburton. Nobody is Tyrese Halliburton, but he's that sort of level of engine. And I think Trae's value was nuked by DeJounte Murray. I think every possession DeJounte Murray used with Trae on the court was making Atlanta actively worse because Trae is so much better. I think getting him out of there is going to re-elevate Trae to being as awesome as we have seen him before. Now it's awesome with limitations. He is terrible defending. The offense can only go so far. I think to me, this is my version of a De'Aaron Fox type player of he's just really, really good at those things. I know Trae and Cat are those empty calorie guys. We have to imagine them on other teams. I'm imagining them on other teams where I think they can be good quality contributors.
You say you care about winning and you're on these guys. One, hey, well, they nuked Towns' value. Is that why they had their best season and made the Western Conference Finals? Or is it that, I get it because you're still coming, this is Warriors-gasmness. That's what this is we're still in the small ball era where everybody just runs up and shoots threes from 35 feet. No, this is a too big league now. And if you can't run that too big lineup out, you are in trouble. Knicks first half of the season. Towns, this is the problem. If you put Towns in the post, are you is this good? No. Okay. If Towns is your best player and creator, is this good? No. What's Towns' best offensive role? As a pick and pop big. Does that sound like an elite player? No. Okay, but at least he's good on defense, right? No. This is the problem. Is there's too many ways. Now, Towns battled last season, and I thought he did great. He was better on defense. He contributed to that team. He was awesome. Towns did the stuff that was necessary, and he got traded for it, and that sucks for him. But the vulnerabilities with him, he is never... You can't even give him the ball in matchup situations in triple threat and be go attack in this advantage situation. That's why they lost to the Mavericks. He couldn't beat Derrick Jones Jr. That's not who he is. I like him on the Knicks because it's I love the idea of running him as a small ball 5 with Brunson versus the Celtics. I'm more worried about it when they face Joel Embiid. With Trae, it's just the simple. Who wants to play with him? Who comes away being man, I love playing with Trae Young? Who comes out of there happy? I get it. The numbers all say that DeJounte Murray was the problem. Can't deny it. The numbers all say that. That's the Jim Turvey thesis, is that actually DeJounte Murray was the problem. I don't buy it. I think Trae Young's the problem. That's the gap between us.
All right, real quick, a couple of Grizzlies. We have them at 30 and 50, just opposite each other. Jaren Jackson, you're higher on. You've got him around 30, Bane around 50. I have Desmond Bane around 30 and Jaren Jackson around 50. Why is Jaren Jackson so much higher for you than Desmond Bane?
Elite rim protection, right? Just an elite rim protector. The rebounding's not great. Jaren also made a lot of strides offensively the last 2 seasons. He's actually gotten go-to moves, and that was something that was really missing from his game. I've gotten a lot higher on Jaren's offense. I'm not go give him the ball and let him create, but I no longer am just oh God, whenever he pump fakes and takes someone off the dribble. He's gotten to where he's a competent offensive player with the ball. Look, Desmond I'm trying to contain my Desmondness. This is me overcorrecting for Desmond because like I love Bane. I think he's a killer. I think he is phenomenal. I think he has a breakout. I think last year would have been a breakout if they didn't get hit with a year from hell. There's a lot of signals that he improved last year, and this could be the breakout season. From the train perspective, okay, I don't want to be too early. I'm willing to risk being late for this one. I love Desmond Bane, and I had to contain it. With Jaren, it's just like, look, Jaren has an identifiable skill that he is better at the one thing that he does better than anything that Desmond does. There's nothing that Bane does as well as Jaren protects the rim.
Yeah, that's fair. To me, Desmond Bane is kind of a bet on just positional value and just how he can go onto any team and add the things he does well. And there just aren't that many guys. Like we think there are, like, oh, we just need to get like a shooter, right? Just somebody that can just go score 20 points and shoot lights. Like there's not that many of those dudes out there. Shooting guard especially was my by far thinnest group out of this mix. So that was why he ended up a little bit higher. The advanced metrics that I use and look at, I thought I would be higher in Jaren Jackson. I was surprised that he came in this low. There are not a lot of happy looking metrics for him. BPM, EPM, whatever the numbers are, just a little more tepid than I thought. I'd like to see less offense from Jaren and more defense again this year. I do think we're going to head that direction. Okay, we are moving towards wrap up. On our rundown, I have a list of some guys that I think that you are higher on, certainly than me. I'm going to give you, yes, go ahead.
We can go a little longer. Well, let's go a little long. We'll be okay.
All right. Dad's giving me a little permission. Let's not rush through it. So I made a list of, from our rankings, what I call my guys and Matt's guys, a starting five if we can. So let's go back and forth then a little bit. So I know you want to talk about this guy. He came in at number 50. There's no doubt you put him at number 50 so you could call him a top 50 player on your list. Talk to me about your guy, Jalen Suggs.
39% from three last year. I didn't even know that. Like when I first did the ranking, I had Suggs in like the 60s, and then I bumped him way, way up because I was like, he actually shot last year too. Jalen, to me, there's a couple of things here. One, he would have been my DPOY vote. He wouldn't have won because wings don't win. We talked about that on the DPOY episode. Don't bet him. But he would have been my vote. Suggs gets under your shirt. He's disruptive. He makes so many plays. It's not just that he's able to, like, it's one thing to, really get up under a guy and annoy him, the Patrick Beverly. It's another to do it in a responsible way without fouling too much. And to also, like, Jaden McDaniels has a huge fouling problem, for example, that he should still be in the top 100. But it's like Suggs made a million plays over the court, sniping passes, making reads, those types of things. And Suggs, to me, this is going to be a telltale year. He's either going to go up to the top 40 or he's going to drop into like the 70s range. If the offense isn't there, what I've heard is that Suggs has told them that he wanted a shot point guard, and they've rewarded that. They've got KCP, so he's got help on that end. Suggs in the playoffs kind of showed that he wanted to be that guy. Now, he wasn't ready. Like, their offense is still garbage. But if Jalen Suggs is able to develop a little bit of an offensive game, just like a little bit off the dribble, just enough to be competent and passable, he's such an elite defender that he'll be able to be impactful here. I love Jalen Suggs' game. I think he's a huge impact player.
I love Jalen. I hope that you were right. I'm a little bit lower on him in my rankings, but I'm excited to watch him this year. I agree. I think he's going to move off this number for better or for worse. I'm hoping that is the for better. So very funny to me. We each ranked our top 100. You had a player at number 59 that I had not in my top 100. I had a player at number 59 that you had not in your top 100. Your version of this player is the guy that you were stunned did not make my list. It is Derek Lively. Tell me about Derek Lively.
So, the starting center for the Western Conference champion, an awesome screener, an awesome rim protector, fundamentally changed the identity of the Dallas Mavericks in tandem with their addition of PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. But it was like every playoff game was survive the Gafford minutes, get to the Lively minutes. We talked about this when we did our division preview for the Mavericks and why I'm so high on them, why I'm betting them 55 plus. When Lively and Luka played together, that team was a 53-win team last season. That's how impactful he is. It was hidden by the injuries to both of them in the games where they played without one another. He is the essential component to a top contender in the West. Lively's rim protection at such a young age is already ahead. He is raved about as a mature, lovable young kid that everybody is very excited to play with. He's a great screen setter. He's able to finish. He's got some touch. He is not a player that you can necessarily pigeonhole. I don't see him as a stretch five ever. I hate it when people start talking about making all these guys into stretch fives. I don't think that that's the case. But I do think that his ability to be a stretch five points to his touch, which is only going to improve. And as he gets bigger and stronger, he is going to be that much more impactful. He is the key component of what will become maybe the most dangerous pick and roll duo over the next 5 years. That's Luka Doncic and Derek Lively. So I think Derek Lively should be this high.
Yeah, it's a strong case for me. I think I am recognizing those things, but just giving a lot of that credit to Luka, which maybe is not fair. But I think that's why I'm so high on Luka. My guy at 59 was CJ McCollum, who I find unfathomable that you didn't even have in the top 100. You didn't have him in your top 150. You just think he's a guy. I think he's been the second best player on the Pelicans team. I think he's been really, really good for them since going there. I didn't even think I was that high on CJ McCollum. I think that he's the answer to a question I have coming up on. I think he's the guy that is going to be the most shocking straight up omission from our Elite 100. Maybe not. Maybe I just randomly am still high on CJ McCollum. Couple more teammates here for you. You've got two guys in the top 70 that I really should. It's my team after all, the Minnesota Timberwolves, but we know I'm a terrible fan. You've got Naz Reid, 67, and Jaden McDaniels at 70. Why are those two so high for you?
An all defensive selection and a sixth man, and the sixth man of the year are not in your 100. Process your fan trauma, Brandon. Like, this is gross. Naz Reid is beloved and he changes games. Look, I understand that you will index on playoffs on a little bit of a higher one than me. I don't ignore that. That's why like Naz could never be like a top 50 guy for me, because in the playoffs he was a vulnerability. Like, that was a hidden secret, is like the playoff minutes with Naz were bad. That he was boosted up by an insane game 2 in Denver, where Denver was just shook and out of its head. And the rest of the time it was like they started killing the Naz minutes. But in the regular season, there were so many times last year. One of the reasons why we made so much money on this live betting Wolves when they would go down by 10 early, because Naz would come in and fundamentally change the game. Second quarter, third quarter, Naz comes in and the whole game changes. Shooter, rebounder, hustle player, screen setter, beloved by the fans, beloved by the teammates, fits into all these types of roles. Not having him, I don't mind if he was just like, if you had him 91st, I'd be like, okay, I get it, right? I get it. Like, you're never going to give Naz the ball and be like, go get us a bucket, big guy. I get it. But not having him at all is malpractice. Jaden, look, the defense, I have issues in terms of, and like, that's why with Jaden at 70, like that, he would be much higher if he didn't foul as much as he does. But if we're going to talk about like an elite skill set, Jaden really is like, the guys that he does defend well, he kills. He makes them miserable. Jaden McDaniels is a guy that can absolutely ruin your night if you're an offensive wing in this league or a guard. He struggles with bigger bodies. He just does. He struggles with bigger dudes. It's why we targeted the Mavericks in that conference finals matchup, because I was like, Luka's going to body him. Luka bodied him. They had to switch it up by the end of that series. But Jaden's still very good. I get the offensive struggles are an issue, but he's not completely incompetent. He's not Matisse Thybulle in these scenarios. So not having him at all on there is crazy, because one, Jaden is elite in at least one category and fine in a bunch of others, and Naz is really good in a lot of areas.
Yeah, I don't have much to say. I'm nowhere near on these guys. So
how did they like? How?
Look, Naz Reid is sixth man of the year. You're right. 67th. Okay, there's 30 NBA teams. 60 guys should be top 2 players in NBA teams. That would make Naz Reid a top 3rd player on a team. He's a 6th man. The math ain't mathin' for me. Jaden McDaniels is more the stuff you acknowledged already. Like, I will admit outright, if there is a clear blind spot on the list that I know about for myself, I don't know how properly to value defense from defense first, defense only type players to balance that elsewhere. I know that I have guys that are elite defenders like Jaden McDaniels one-on-one as a defender. I know I have those guys potentially too low. I would rather be right about the offensive guys that I feel more confident in, even if I have to be wrong about the defense. So that's where I'm less on him. Naz Reid is a sixth man to me, and I think that he's a nice bench option on a team that Minnesota believes way too much in with this recent trade that they made.
Would you rather have Naz Reid or outside of Wemby and Vassell and CP3, because Stephon Castle doesn't count. We don't do rookies.
I would rather have Harrison Barnes every day of the week than Naz Reid every single day.
Let's go on. Let's just move on.
All right. Last Matt's guy. You get to choose one of these three. You had them 74, 75, 76. I had all of them outside my top 100. Brandon Miller, Jose Alvarado, Andrew Nembhard. Pick a guy. Which one of them is your guy in your top 75-ish?
GTA was plus 12 on court net. Plus 12, Brandon. There is, and it's been a consistent trend over 3 years of how much better they are with Alvarado on the court. There is no slice and dice of minutes, starters, context, anything to define why Jose Alvarado was plus 12 last year on court net. Alvarado is, in my opinion, the most impactful bench player in the league. And I think this is a big thing. I care more about the most impactful bench player than I do about the fill-in-the-blank Harrison Barnes on a lot of these teams. And that's where this kind of gets to. Nembhard, I get it. He had a bad regular season. I don't blame you for not having him top 100. That's me over-indexing on the playoff run. Brandon Miller,
yeah.
I get it.
I want to get there on Miller. I'd like to. I think Miller's on my list a year from now. I think you're just maybe a little early on him.
Why is Jose not on the list? Why?
That's a good question, because I have a bunch of guys like him, like the Carusos or Marcus Smarts of the world. I love those sorts of players. I think just he doesn't quite play enough for me, and he maybe should be closer to my list. I think probably I give you up a top 120 as we were prepping this list. I think Alvarado didn't really even make my considerations list because of the minutes played thing restricting him. I really like him. I agree with what you said. I think he probably should be near my mix of things.
Availability is a fair one. I tend to miss how many games bench players miss because they're not in the starting lineup. So if you're missing
games and only playing like 20, 22 minutes a game, you're really limiting the value you can have at the end of the day there is all.
That's true.
My guys, I'm just going to mention a few of these guys. A guy that I can't believe is my guy that you can't believe is either. From out of left field, J-Dub, Jalen Williams, 22nd in my rankings, miles ahead of yours. It is a positional scarcity thing for me with him as much as anything. I also just think he is in for a huge leap this year. I'm not going to say much more yet because next Friday, spoiler alert, we'll be talking about him for one of the awards that I'm very high on with him. You can probably figure out which one that is. Evan Mobley, I have 38th on my list. I think Evan Mobley quietly made a real leap the second half of last season. I think we feel like as fans that he sort of stalled out and we're feeling a little disappointed in him. I think actually while that team was kind of missing dudes and that sort of thing, I think Mobley looked really good and ready to go. I would like to see him soon as a center. I think that's where he'll be more valuable for them. I think he's closer to ready than it seems. He's starting to shoot a little bit, add a little more offensive value. I'm just very high on Mobley. I think he's a guy that can be an elite second banana on a title team type player. Not yet, but I think that's where we're heading. A guy that I can't believe I'm this high on, that maybe this is just fake numbers from the back half of the season. I had Colin Sexton in my top 60. You didn't have him ranked in the top 100. That's what I would have thought like 2 months ago. The numbers for Sexton are just really good for the end of last season. Like the offensive BPM was like 4.5, which is like that's not even all-star level. That's above all-star level for like half of the season down the stretch. Now, the defensive numbers are tragic. Like they are horrendous. And all these numbers are coming from games that didn't matter. They were tank games. So maybe none of it matters. I didn't realize how good Sexton is as a shooter already. Like he is an elite shooter on volume. It is proven over a bunch of seasons. And he took a leap as a playmaker back half of last season. Like there's a lot happening there. I was really surprised. I think when Utah eventually does trade Lauri Markkanen and kind of hit the reset button, I want to be the team that comes in on Colin Sexton after that. I think he's going to be a lot cheaper. He's certainly worse than Lowry, but I want to be the guy that scoops up Sexton. I think he actually be a really nice pickup. One last name I got to throw out because I have him number 75. You have him outside of your elite 250. I think Josh Giddey had a real leap toward the end of last season. I know I know we hate on the guy. I know his ceiling is limited. I know the team construct. I'm not the guy to like Josh Giddey. I think he's going to be very valuable. I think he already is. He's so young for the stuff he did well. He had a big breakout also down the stretch for them. The shooting numbers were much better. We'll see if it lasts. I think the numbers that I go by would put Josh Giddey closer to top 50 on this list. I'm already penalizing him because I don't like the stuff that I think he is. I think like the list of dudes that around this range for me, the DeMar DeRozans of the world, where it's like, I don't really want you on my team, but I have to acknowledge the stuff you add to a floor for regular season. To me, I think that's where Josh Giddey falls into that sort of mix of players. Thoughts on J-Dub, Mobley, Sexton, or Giddey?
All right, so let's talk about J-Dub. It's really funny. I looked up your tweets on Jalen Williams. How about this? On June 23rd, 2022, LMAO, wait, the Thunder really drafted both Jalen Williams? Then a year later...
Well, that's just confusing.
And then a year later on April 12th, 2023, wait, Oklahoma City has 2 Jalen Williams? Like, you forgot about the same joke that you made at the draft. Really what it looks like is you were actually really high on Jalen, and then the playoff series really... You started tying in him with Lou Dort, and then your hatred of Lou Dort infected Jalen. Because the words May 15th, y'all lied to me about Jalen Williams. That was a tweet that was given. But like, yeah. You were like, I think there's a lot of these where it's like, he's going to be great. The feel Jalen Williams has for the game as a rookie out of Santa Clara is truly unreal. Like, you have a lot of positive things, but then you also on May 13th of this year during the playoff series, Jalen Williams do literally anything challenge with the do something. Sure.
I was really frustrated.
I think that's why I thought you were lower on him. He can make this jump. I think for me, I'm waiting to see. I don't want to be too early. Like I said, you got to do the thing, and you can project a little bit. I just wasn't projecting as much as you are. And if you're right, then we'll talk about it next Friday. Mobley, I think, is fine. I just think that for me, it's like, look, Mobley has never proven that he can be an offensive player outside of a spot and shoot catch up, like a catch and shoot spot up guy. And it's like, would you rather have Mobley or Jaren Jackson Jr. talking about like as a rim protector? You'd rather have Jaren. He won DPOY. Sexton's a really interesting one. You're right. All the numbers are there. He was really good. The reason that he's not in mine is I am concerned that he's one of those guys that just like, he wasn't on the scouting report. No one paid attention to him. Everyone knew they could beat Utah. He got numbers. There's a reason here's a good one. There's a reason no one's traded for him. Now, if you think that's
Danny Ainge might be the reason.
Yeah. If you think that they're missing out, that's totally fair. I don't have a problem with Sexton being where you have him on this list. Giddey, I think, is fine. If you really want this one, here's one. Oklahoma City decided that they didn't want Josh Giddey, a player that they drafted. A really good team decided they didn't want him.
Yeah.
I think I actually was defending Josh late in the season. He had a real late season turnaround. I think Giddey can still be good. He jumps this 250 range is just basically like there's a bunch of guys, and Giddey's just like a guy. Like, he's a totally fine starter, but I don't think he's elite. So I don't think he's in the 100. Right. I'm excited for this next section.
Yeah, we got 2 more 5-man teams for you. So you've taken to branding me in our NBA Slack at Action Network as the generational hater, which I'm just leaning full on.
Not just you, it's you and Fonseca. Let's be very clear. It's you and Fonseca are both generational haters.
That's fair. Well, Fonseca's going to hate me for one of these here. So I made us a generational haters club starting 5. Let me give you all 5, and then we'll talk through. These are guys, if you've listened to me on any podcast, you're going to be real surprised by the guys on the list. Okay, our starter is Jaylen Brown. Here are the rankings. Matt Moore, responsibly, Jaylen Brown, 22nd. All right, sure, that seems fair. I have him at 47th. That's my real Jaylen Brown ranking. Okay, up next, Fonseca, is Bam Adebayo. Matt Moore has him at 19th on the list. Very good center, possibly one of the best defenders in the league. I have him at 50th. Jalen Suggs, 50. Bam Adebayo, 50. Those are our number 50s on the list. That's my actual ranking of Bam Adebayo. Third in our starting lineup of the generational haters, Paolo Banchero. I have him at 64th. You have him at 33rd. We'll talk about the Magic. Our guy Rudy Gobert comes in 4th on the list, 36th for you, 62nd for me. That one might be a little bit personal if I'm being totally fair. And last one, we flip. You get a generational hater pick on the team. I know this hurts your feelings. I'm high on Mike Conley. I have him 52nd. I still believe in old man Conley. You barely snuck him into your top 100 at number 96. You got one guy. We needed a point guard. So you got a guy in the Generational Haters Club. I'm hating on Jalen, Bam, Paolo, and Gobert. Where do we start with this group?
Okay. Brandon, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum was the best player on the Celtics last year. Jaylen Brown had the best season of any player on a team that won 60-plus games and the NBA title with the 5th best SRS in NBA history. Okay? He has become... I hated his defense 2 years ago. He was a really good defender last year. He was a plus defender. Is he the 5th best defender on his starting 5? Yes. Yes, absolutely. But he was still a plus defender. Okay? Like, Jaylen Brown would be... Yeah, I'll say it. Jaylen Brown would be the best player on the Atlanta Hawks. He'd be the best player on the Atlanta Hawks. He contributes more to winning. He just does. He doesn't make everyone hate their lives. He complements a really good team. Spot up shooter, tough finisher, willing passer, had great chemistry with Porzingis for much of the season. I actually think this ended this way. Porzingis had more assists from Jaylen Brown than from Tatum because that combo was really good. Jaylen Brown is what made the integration of Kristaps Porzingis work. There's just no reason to have him this low. What is your deal with Dude, I get 2 years ago he couldn't dribble with the left. I get it. He dribbled with the left last year, man. Like, what is your deal with Jaylen Brown?
I just think that people are just a little too high on him because he happens to be on a Celtics team that keeps being in the conference finals year after year. And I realize happens to be is a very unfair sounding verb. They happen to be in the conference finals because Jaylen Brown's on the team is a perfectly good retort to that. I just think he is a very good role player on a very good team. I don't think that he is a star. I don't think that if you put him on the Hawks and if he were their best player, that is a terrible team. A terrible team if Jaylen Brown is your best player. He is moderately efficient on 2s, on 3s, on all of his scoring. He is the worst defender of the 5 on that team. That's fine. There's 4 very good defenders on the team. He was good in the playoffs at moments. There were games where I thought he was excellent. You can look at my tweets. I gave him some credit for those games also. There were other games that he wasn't good in those playoffs. I do not think he should have been the finals MVP or the conference finals MVP. I don't think he should have been in discussion for either of them, quite frankly. I think he's a very good player. I actually have him in my tier that I call guys that just help you win. It's a tier with Drew Holiday, Draymond Green, who you've heard me like wax poetic about these guys. And in that tier are Jaylen Brown and Bam Adebayo. I want those guys on my winning team. I think they're really good players. I just don't think they're top 20 players the way that we talk about them because they don't contribute enough offensively or enough efficient offensively to the league, to an NBA team. I think that they're in the perfect ecosystem that makes them look really good, and I just can't get there on the value. I want them on my team. I don't think I'm low on them. I think y'all are just way too high on them.
Jalen Williams at 22 versus Jaylen Brown at 47.
Yeah, because the Celtics would be a lot better if they had Jalen Williams.
Okay. All right. Domantas Sabonis at 36 versus Jaylen Brown at 47.
Yeah, I look, you talked about Sabonis. Like, I have to put him somewhere. Like, he is a regular season value add to the team.
Kyrie Irving.
Okay.
At 23 versus Jaylen Brown at 47.
Yeah, because Kyrie Irving is a lot better and way, way more valuable to the NBA team with his shooting and the offense that he has. I skipped Kyrie on our rundown because I didn't want you to have to not say terrible things about him. I know how you feel. Look, it's where I'm at here. Here's the list. Let me just give you some names of where the peers I'm putting Jaylen Brown in that I think this is complimentary. I genuinely do. I mentioned Drew. I mentioned Draymond. Then I got Jaylen Brown. I got Mikal Bridges. I think that's a really good sort of comparison for Jaylen Brown. It's a very nice, really good role player I want on my team. I've got Jared Allen and Bam Adebayo next. I want those centers on my team. I think they're valuable, good, winning players. I have Mike Conley in this group. I have Jaren Jackson in this group. I like all these guys. I think they're all on winning teams for a reason. They're just not top 25. There can't be 50 top 25 guys.
Paolo, I don't mind. You got him 64. I've got him 33rd. This is just the efficiency gap. Is I think he's going to get better as a shooter this season, and that he's enough of a primary weapon on offense. Plus, he's shown himself to be a good defender and rebounder, which we had questions about, that I'm willing to have him higher because he has so much responsibility on him. And you're asking him to do the thing, which is like, yeah, no, if you make your jump shots, I'll pull you up, but you haven't made your jump shots. So you're 64th. Totally fine. Like, I don't have any problem with that. Gobert, I don't have any problem with. 60 seconds, like a little excessive. And again, I would say, let's look at all the Minnesota Timberwolves. How did their season end? Like, same thing with Boston. It's just that one you are definitely in your Minnesota fan head about. Conley, I felt awful about, but it's just like, look, he's just getting up there in age, man. Like, he's just old, and I'm projecting a drop off based off of that. I think the availability, I talked to him last season, and I was like, how much work does it take for you to be ready to go? And he's like, so much. It just takes a lot for him to be ready to go. He shot really well last season. He'll probably shoot really well this season. I love having Mike Conley around, but also, like, if he matches up with De'Aaron Fox is going to kill him. Like, he's just going to kill him, and that's a problem. Yeah. Bam. Okay. I'm higher on Bam. I'm fine with that. He shot more threes last season. I've said that I think he's the best pound for pound defender in the NBA. I said that Suggs would be DPOY. He would have been last year, but if you ask me who's the best defender, it's Bam, because I do feel that Bam can guard 1 through 5. We say that about a lot of guys. The list is very small, and Bam legitimately can guard 1 through 5. He had a better. What I'm surprised by is he had a better offensive season, and I feel like you think he got worse, and so I'm trying to understand why he's at 50. 19's probably a touch high. He's probably 25 to 30, somewhere in there. But 50 is a lot here for Bam Adebayo, who was the best player on a playoff team last year.
Really? Okay.
Jimmy didn't play.
Okay, so he was the best player on a playoff team that wasn't any good. Like, what's that doing for me? Jimmy Butler was the best player on the playoff team. The reason they were in the playoffs is Jimmy Butler. So
no, that's not true. No. Look, go back and look at the game logs and how often, go listen to Miami Heat podcasts and how often they said, when's playoff Jimmy coming? Because it's just not here. The Heat fans were super frustrated with Butler last year. I know how you feel about Jimmy. I know, especially because he made your team look stupid, so you like him more. But I'm telling you, Bam was the best player last year for the Miami Heat.
Made both of my teams look stupid. That's like a double bonus for me. It's great out here being a Bulls, Timberwolves, Jimmy Butler fan. Yeah, part of my Bam ranking is a Jimmy Butler thing because I'm always so high on Jimmy. And I agree, playoff Jimmy never showed up last year. It was not a good year for him by his standard. That's because his standard is so high. That's because he has been a top 10 player. He was not last year. I don't have him in my top 10 now either. I have him close. I have him like 14th on my list. I think Butler is better than people give credit for, especially in the playoffs. He continues, when he is available, to reach a level that I think is not necessarily best player in a title team, because we've seen it fall short, but the next closest thing to that, I think that's what Jimmy Butler is. Bam Adebayo just hasn't contributed offensively as a hub, as an engine, as a contributor. I don't have any questions about his defense. I think the defense is more valuable in the playoffs than it is in the regular season, just by a touch of how people value it. But to me, it's just about, like, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, who above Bam in my top 50 do I have as a less valuable offensive player than Bam Adebayo? And I can't think of the example of it. And to me, it's just is me valuing, again, I mentioned earlier, I will admit that I probably have some defense first guys ranked a little bit too low. I think Bam is just not that helpful a contributor offensively. I think also the combination with him and Butler, which is partly Butler's fault, makes them a really tough team to build around. I think he's a little bit harder building around type player than it seems. Not defensively, great defensively, but because of the limitations, I think that hurts a little bit. Now look, I thought Bam was awesome at the Olympics. He really impressed me. I probably have tweets saying I don't think he should have been on the team. He would not have been my choice for the team. He was great. He hit shots. He did exactly what was needed. If we get that Bam, he's going to move up my list. He's just a guy that I'm lower on. Paolo, I was surprised. I ended up with Franz Wagner way higher than I expected to. I think those two, to me, it's a team building thing. I think Franz fits a lot of good winning teams very easily. I don't know that the version of Paolo right now fits a team I want to win. I have him basically about dead even to Julius Randle, who I think is like the right comp for right now what Paolo is. And you know how I feel about Julius Randle. My new teammate as a Timberwolves fan, Julius Randle. Boy, am I excited about that. Can't wait to have a guy like that on my team. Okay, last starting five for us. If we had to have the generational haters club, I wanted to end on a positive note. Matt, we had my guys, we had your guys, we hated on guys. How about our guys? How about just a warm hug for our guys? The five guys that I thought actually, to an average reader, we're both going to come off looking like, what? How are you so high on this? But they're guys that we agree on that are both just guys I think are guys are going to come off a little bit higher. So our guys, we talked about one already. The point guard for our guys are Tyrese Halliburton. He's our number 6 composite ranking. He's our guy. We made the case for him. Here's the rest of our starting five. And it's not really a starting five because of positions, whatever. Here's the guys in our combined rank. Chet Holmgren, number 24. We both have him as a top 25-ish player already after one season. That's pretty crazy for a rookie center. Alperen Şengün, number 40 on our list. And one spot later, Cade Cunningham, number 41. Some projection involved on Cade, but we are both in on these guys as top 40-ish players, possible franchise guys, I would think we both think. And then one last guy who's not even a starter yet, because I don't know what the heck they are doing, Trey Murphy. I thought I'd be real high on Trey Murphy. I still think I am. I just think you are also. We have Trey Murphy 57th. I don't know what they're doing. Like, sign the max extension, give him the money, put him in the lineup. I want Trey Murphy on all my teams. I think he's awesome. Those are our guys. We talked about Halliburton. Tell me about Chet, Şengün, Cade, or Trey.
It sucks that Chet's always going to be compared to Wemby. It just sucks because he's such a phenomenal player. Like, he is closer to being an elite player than Alonzo Mourning was to Shaq when those guys were the comp. And this, if you're watching on youtube.com, this is an Alonzo Mourning signed basketball. He's my favorite player of all time. Chet's insane. Like, he's just absolutely incredible. This guy can have 8-10 blocks in a game. There's just so few guys that can actually do that. He's going to be a better shooter this year. All the stuff that I'm actually a little bit worried about with Wembanyama, with the projections offensively, I think Chet's going to be better at, because he's got a year on him. He's a more polished player already. Chet's going to be phenomenal. Şengün is able to be the hub of a playoff team, and their offense was not good, so like that needs to kind of factor in here. I'm curious to see what this is going to look like this year, but Şengün did his job defensively. I talked a lot 2 years ago. I was like, hey, you can actually use Şengün in some of these defensive systems, and he's okay. And everybody's like, you're crazy. And then like they were way better. I don't think Şengün is as close to Jokic as a lot of people do. Like, we need to keep Jokic, we need to keep Şengün's name out of your mouth when you talk about Jokic.
Keep everyone's name out of your mouth. Jokic is his own thing. Let's not do that.
Yeah, don't comp him. He's not baby Jokic, but he's really good. And he's very efficient. He does a lot of things really well. Cade, go look at the numbers. The jump shot was there. He talked on media day about finishing better. They have a better offensive system. I'm telling you, I've done the tape. They set up Cade to fail last season, whether by design to help him develop or by accident because Monty Williams didn't care. Either way, they're going to have a better offensive system this year. The offense in Cleveland was bad. I get it. We're not talking about that. We're talking about getting them out of bottom 5 into top 20. And I think that the Pistons get out of that top 20. And the biggest reason will be Cade, who's a great engine. He makes other players better, great defender. Trey should be way higher than this. If Trey wasn't stuck on a team with Brandon Ingram and he was just allowed to play in this role that he wanted, we would both have him top 50. He would be a top 40 guy borderline. That's how good and valuable he is. Trey Murphy's awesome, and he needs a bigger opportunity.
Yeah, I would love to put Trey Murphy in that list of dudes I named off with like Jaylen Brown and Bam Adebayo, the guys I want to go to battle with and like have on my team. I think that's what Trey Murphy is as a player. I think Şengün, the comp for me that I'm concerned about, it's not a Jokic comp. I wonder if he's Sabonis, and I need to see him prove to me that he's not Sabonis. And Sabonis, I have ranked higher. You have him ranked pretty high also. It's a regular season value thing because he's so valuable in the regular season. I am concerned that there might not be a different level for Şengün to get to. It's early, though. I think actually for the age that he is and how good he is already, I think he is a weirdly under talked about player in the league. There's a lot of buzz with Houston about, well, I don't know, Jalen Green or Şengün. Which one is our guy? Who are we going to sign to the extension and try to build around? What are you doing? Watch a basketball game. This is not a difficult decision. I'm pretty confident Houston will make the right choice. They got smart guys making good draft picks there. Chet is just a guy that is an absolute unicorn. We use that term way too often now, but what he does defensively with what he can do as a shooter, an elite shooter, and I think that that is going to only get better over time. Just the sort of thing that he's the perfect guy with Shea because of the way that he opens up the spacing for Shea to attack into it. And Cade, the numbers from second half of last season, frankly, the numbers were so good that he's not my most improved player because he already improved so much and the numbers were so good already that I don't know he can improve more to get there. That hasn't really stopped voters before, but just check the numbers. They've been good, even though the Pistons haven't been. All right, lightning round questions to get out of here. We're going to zip through these. For you, what was the hardest part of the Elite 100 exercise?
Dealing with you leaving Nas Reed off. That was pretty much the hardest part. No, I think for me, a lot of it is trying to figure out how much you're punishing guys for things that are out of their control. And I think Trae Young's a good example of this. What if it was DeJounte? What if it is just like the fit? What if Trae snaps back and they're back to that 2022 run? Like what if that's the case? Like what if Trae puts a great season together? That to me is always the hardest part, is trying to integrate stuff where you could talk about like he's not a winner, and a lot of these guys go into different circumstances and win. And sometimes that's because they change, but trying to evaluate that in the moment and in the context, I think is really tough.
Yeah, for me, I think it was the back end of the list was a lot harder to rank than I thought. Just parsing from like 60 to 100. What role are you going to have? What team am I putting you on? Do I want your offense to the defense? Do I want the balance? Am I looking for a veteran? Like there's just the tiers should get longer and wider as you're going down the list. I felt pretty good about where I felt about the top 60. That bottom half of the list was a lot harder to come to. What name for you is not in our combined top 100 that you think the internet is going to get the most mad about? I thought it was CJ McCollum. Who do you think it is?
No one cares about CJ. I love CJ. Like he's a really good, again, CJ's a good player. I just don't have him in the top 100. I think Reeves is a good call. I had him like 56 last year. Like I'm going to get bombed because a lot of guys moved down my list. And so like, that's always like, who's going to wind up getting hit. I think the Celtics fans are just like, I'm going to sick them on you and it's going to be bad. Like they've won 60 plus games and won the title. And you don't think any of them are that good. That's a problem.
Excuse me. I have 5 of their players in the top 50. I actually have a 6th Celtic on the list. Al Horford is in my 80s and you have him outside of your top 100. I think that's a huge miss. I think Al Horford is that good. It's just Jaylen Brown. He's in the list. Austin Reeves, by the way, I think just missed both of our top 100 like by 3 spots or something. So he's just right there. He's not in because numbers have to be round. Do we think Tyler Hero is a miss? Is that a name people are going to get mad about?
Not anymore. I think everyone kind of, even Heat fans, accept that Tyler Hero shouldn't have been traded for Damian Lillard. Everyone accepts it now.
Yeah. All right. Who is, from your personal rankings, who is your highest ranked guy that you could see, not because of aging or injury, but just as a player and how you think about them, falling out of your Elite 100 completely next year?
God, this is tough.
All right. While you're thinking, let me give you my choices. Colin Sexton, I might just be wrong. It might just have been completely fake numbers, fake news from a back half of the season. I ended up with Darius Garland around 50. I did not think I feel very good about Darius Garland. This is more a bet on last season was just a season from hell outlier, and maybe there's something still in there. So I could see him just dropping out. And I think too, maybe, I don't know if he'd go all the way out of the 100. LaMelo Ball, if he just ain't it, and maybe that's an injury thing and that's not fair, but if they just can't prove they can do anything useful with him as a player, we both surprisingly had him like equal to each other around 45th, I think. If we just can't get anything out of LaMelo, I could see us both punting him into the sun on here. Out of the top 100 might be a little too far. Did you come up with a name?
Yeah, I got it's Kobe White, 66.
Hmm.
I had him really high. You had him low because you like the Bulls, like the Bulls. Um, Look, I wasn't a Kobe guy. I thought he really did make strides, and we saw this in preseason last year. Like they started like Locked On Bulls was talking about like Kobe looked really good at point guard tonight in preseason, and then he really did make a jump. He's either going to cement himself as like, hey, Kobe might be a guy you can build around, or it's going to be like Anthony Simons, where like, okay, puts up numbers, bad team, don't care.
Yeah.
So he could definitely drop out. He is a soft 66 here on my list. I gave him credit for what he was able to accomplish last year.
Yeah, you had Kobe around that range. I had Zach LaVine around that range, and you had Zach outside of your 100, just barely. You had him just barely outside of the 100. Maybe
Look,
the knees are just shot. I don't know.
Hey, I bet him for MVP like 3 seasons ago.
You did. I remember.
Look, I just
gone.
If he's a guy where he is that when he profiles what he is as a player, and they literally can't trade him, I can't have him in the elite 100. I just can't.
Fair enough. All right, 2 more questions. Who from your personal top 15 do you think could be outside of your top 25 a year from now? My answer here, just because I might just be holding on to a thing that's not there anymore, I have Kawhi Leonard at number 11. Maybe it's just over. Maybe there is no Kawhi left in there, but he's so good in the playoffs when he's actually healthy. Like, you basically with Kawhi Leonard get like one healthy season every 5 years, but you win a championship that year. And I just, at the top of my list, I want the guy who's going to win me a championship. He can be the guy that wins a championship. Who's your guy, top 15, that could be outside top 25 next year?
I want to say Anthony Davis, but I won't. I'll say De'Aaron Fox. I've got him 17th. It's entirely possible he slides at like 26. That could happen. Like, I could just be too high on him. That's possible, but especially because he's playing next to DeMar DeRozan, which that tends to hurt other guys. Team gets better. Other stars get worse. It's a weird dynamic, but yeah, I'll say De'Aaron Fox.
All right. And last one, who from our combined top 15 do we think could leap into the top 10 next year? I'm going to assume this is what Tyrese Halliburton did for you. Even though you were very high on him, I'm going to assume that he is the guy that made the leap. Now, I pointed out here, unfortunately for us, I think Anthony Edwards is the obvious answer. He is number 15, so he can't be a choice here. Who is not in our current top 15 that we think can crack the top 10? That is a tough group to crack. Is there anyone on the list that sticks out to you?
Yeah, I think there's actually a lot. Ja Morant, Devin Booker. Paul George is probably too old. Chet Holmgren, I think.
Oh, wow. That jump. Top 10. Okay.
I won't say Fox, borderline for me, but Fox would be like in consideration. That'd be my list.
Yeah, I had John Book as possibilities. I think overall, just as we're talking through this, I think I'm a little bit stickier on guys from year to year, maybe, and that's a little bit different as well. I actually had the other Thunder player on here, J-Dub, if I'm right about what he does, improving, maybe. Like, the top 10 is a real
Stop trying to make fetch happen.
It's possible. I think if I had to actually pick one guy, I think it might be Dame. Maybe last year just didn't work and everything was wrong, and Dame is still Dame and he could just be back in the top 10 again.
Yeah, if they make the conference finals and it's Dame time, tap, then yeah, we're gonna be like, oh yeah, Dame's awesome. He's such an elite shooter. He's such a great offensive player. Like, that's entirely possible.
All right, that is the Elite 100. I think we talked about 200 players in our Elite 100 today. Somehow we got them all in a mere 1 hour and whatever number of minutes we went over. Next Friday, I will be back with Matt talking my awards picks for the season. We did MVP already, but we'll be doing all of the other awards picks. Obviously, Buckets is coming at you all these next few weeks with all sorts of episodes, getting you ready for the season. Lots of great stuff out there. Price Finder has been a great series so far, getting that on MVP and on each of the awards. Lots of fun seeing what our guys think about that. We got a great crew, just a lot of good voices coming on with a lot of different opinions and a lot of fresh bets out there to be had. So be sure to check out everything in the feed. Be sure to watch the feed for what is to come. We'll be back at you all next week and the weeks to come. Matt, how many days until the season as we record this right now? What's our number?
20 as we record
20
this. 20 days.
Let's go. We are almost there. We are ready for some basketball. We'll see you next time. Let's get buckets.